Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl Top 10 with Nick Meanahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey folks, thanks for joining me. This is my first top 10 list in quite a while, since close to the new year, actually, and I do apologize for that. And I apologize even more because I had promised the top 10 solo games list for quite a while, and I'm just now finally getting around to it. These are the 10 games that I enjoy playing solitaire the most. In fact, more than potentially playing with other people, even if that is an option. And on that note, I'm going to give you a little bit of detail as to how I went about creating this list and what this list is, what this list isn't, and so on and so forth. Some people hate my long intros, and if you do, there's going to be a timestamp at the bottom of the screen and also in the description section. Hit that, go straight to the list. You can bypass all of me rambling. Ta-ta. But for those of you who are sticking around, let me talk a little bit about my process for this. Well, first and foremost, one of the main reason why this list was delayed for so long was because, I have a very packed schedule with I have a huge backlog of games to review just normally, and then my other life commitments and things like that. So I don't have the time. I have to dedicate time just to playing games multiplayer with my game group. Getting the time to actually play solitaire games is tough. I really enjoy doing it. I love putting a bunch of movies on TV and just mowing through them as I play games, but I just don't always have the time for that. And one of the reasons why I was procrastinating on putting the list together was because, yes, I could have come up with 10 games at any point, but there's so many games that are either people have recommended them for solitaire for me, or games that I could play solitaire and I never tried them in that way, that I've wanted to play that I just didn't have time to get to. And I just kept putting it off like, what if this game is amazing and I'm excluding it from the list just because I haven't played it yet? And I didn't want to do that, but eventually I just had to say enough is enough. And I'm committing myself to, if people actually respond well to this list, I'll make sure to do another version of it a year from now, like I do with some of my other iterative lists, like the cooperative list and the deck building list. So hopefully some of the games that you might be like, wow, why is that game not on here? Maybe it will be on next year's list. Who knows? Also, I need to point out that ideally, when you're talking about a solitaire games list, you would have 10 games that are really made from the ground up to be solitaire. In fact, maybe that's the main way to play. That is definitely not what this list is. In fact, if you kind of squinted and took a few games off of this list, you might say, is this Nick's top 10 cooperative games list? Because that's just kind of how it worked out. There's a few games here that are known for their solo mode. Most of the games here are known for being fully cooperative games, but I just happen to enjoy playing them more as solitaire games, or perhaps that's the way I play them the most, and hence they make it onto this list. And there is, of course, some crossover between this and the cooperative games list, but there's also some that aren't on the cooperative games list because they may not hold up in multiplayer enough to get them on that other list, but they do perfectly well here because I prefer it this way. So that's sort of my reasoning here. It's not a perfect list. It's probably one of the ones I'm most uncertain about, but hopefully I'll refine it as the year goes on, and we'll do better next year. What can I tell you? But I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you get some inspiration for games that you might enjoy playing solitaire yourself, or just playing in general. That's always the goal when I do something like this. So let's get to it. My number 10 is Onirim, or I never know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Onirim, one of those two pronunciations is probably correct, from Z-Man Games. Now, the version of the game that I had played the most was actually the very small, single card deck version that they had out for a number of years. There's a fancier deluxe version of the game that all of the Oniverse games are sort of following now, the bigger sets that have a bunch of expansions. A few of which I've tried, but some of them I haven't. But still, even what I have played, I've enjoyed enough. And actually, I could put a couple of the different Oniverse games here. Urbion is also a very good game that might have slipped into the spot as well. But I think Onirim is the one that I enjoy the most. This is a game that could be played 1 or 2 players, but really feels like a solo-only game. Basically, there's a surreal theme, a surreal artwork of going through this nightmare dreamscape and trying to deal with these nightmares and dreams and finding the doors and things like that. Just very, very surreal and abstract. The artwork really grew on me, and it's just a very tight hand efficiency game of playing down cards and sort of a set collection type thing to get through these different door cards. There's not a lot to it. It's a really simple game, but it's so difficult especially when you start throwing in some of the expansions and things like that. So it's a game that at least when I had the smaller version, I just take to when I went to go get an oil change, just bust it out, start playing on the table, and so it doesn't take up a lot of space, and it's just very light and fast and fun, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And actually, one of the very first videos I ever did for this channel, when I was just doing little news updates every week, I said, all right, coming soon, a review for Onirim. And I still haven't done it to this day. But one day, I promise I will. That is Onirim from Z-Man Games, my number 10 solo game. My number 9 is one of the newest games on the list, and sadly, it is not widely available. You can get it from some specialty retailers like our sponsor, Board Game Bliss. I just mentioned that in happenstance. But it is Justice League Hero Dice from Heidelberger Spielverlag. I'll get that right one of these days. I was really surprised by how much I was taking with this game. I gave it a very positive review, but even afterwards, I found myself playing it every now and then. It's got a very weird distribution model. Essentially, there are several different sets of the game. There's only 2 right now. Superman and Batman Hero Dice, and there will be Green Lantern and Flash at some point in the future, hopefully near future. And if you only have one set, you can only play the game solo, so that's really one of the best ways to play it, and the most convenient way to play it. But if you have both sets, or if you have 2 of the same set, you can play with up to, I think, 4 other people, potentially. I played it with total of 2 players before. And it's fun. It does offer a little bit more nuance when you have it with multiple players, but as a solo game, it works really, really well. Essentially, depending on what set you have, the game plays a little bit differently, but you're doing the same thing. You're trying to mow through a bunch of the iconic villains of whatever character you are playing as, all the Superman villains or all the Batman villains, or mixed together if you have 2 players. But you're trying to mow through them by rolling dice and trying to get hit symbols. But how you manipulate those dice changes depending on the character. Superman can get a lot of hits, but needs to get rid of kryptonite to make sure that those hits count. Batman needs to use his Batmobile symbols to re-roll a bunch of dice as many times as he can to get as many hits as possible, and then apply them. It's just it's very simple, but there's a lot of interesting decisions to be made. You also have special power cards, but they're limited, and you only have a few of them to use over the long course of the game, deciding which villains to go for, which to leave. They overrun, all these different things. Very tense, very tight, and very fast. I really appreciated this one as a solo game. That is Justice League Hero Dice, my number 9. My number 8 is a board game I have quite a history with in just these last short few years. That is Mage Knight, the board game. Now, what's interesting about this is that this was actually one of the very first games I ever purchased when I really got into modern board gaming. I had only, up to that point, played like Magic and some deck builders like Dominion and Ascension. And I was looking for new games to purchase, like Seasons was another one of the games I first bought. But Mage Knight came very well regarded. At that point, I was only using Amazon to look at games, so it had tons of high ratings, and it had a wonderful looking artwork and fantasy theme, and it was like miniatures with deck building, which I knew I liked at that point, and I'm like, oh, this has got to be amazing. So I picked it up, and it was too much. It was too much for me. It was too much for the other casual people I was playing with. It's an incredibly heavy game, very dense, very tough to get into, very, very long when you're playing with multiple players. And even though I appreciated everything it was going for, where if you're not familiar with it, it's like fantasy miniatures based on the original Mage Knight miniatures game, which is on nobody's top 10 list. Never mind. But you're taking these miniature warlords and going around this map. You're using deck building to fuel your actions with clever card play and either sacking cities or defending cities and things like that, and fighting the other mage knights. It's just very, very interesting, but so dense and so tough to get into, and so very, very long. And I had kind of given up on the game. People kept urging me, Nick, you got to give it another chance. We want to see you review it. You got to get it again. And I did. I traded for another copy, and I tried it again solo this time, something I hadn't done the first time I had the game, and I appreciated it a lot more. When you don't have to sit there constantly with a ton of downtime between turns, waiting for the other players to finish up their turn, you can just mow through the game. It feels a lot faster. You have a lot more control. There's some very interesting scenarios, especially if you have the first expansion, and which is, I think, the Lost Legion expansion. And I just really, really enjoy it as this. In fact, I think that with more plays, I've only played it a couple times solo now, but I think with more plays over time, I might even appreciate it more. I do want to get the other expansions that are out there, although I think the newest one had some issues, so I'm hoping to wait until they have a better printing of that. But nevertheless, I still don't know that I can recommend this for 2 to 4 players, but for 1 player, I really enjoyed it. That is Mage Knight, the board game from WizKids. My number 7, I believe, has been on both iterations of my cooperative games list, and I think it fits in very well here as well. That is Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Island from Portal Games. And much for the same reasons that Mage Knight, the board game, wouldn't quite cut it for me as a multiplayer game. In Robinson Crusoe, I do enjoy playing with other players quite a lot. However, it is extremely long, and there's so much going on, and it's very difficult to teach new players. But as a solo game where, especially since there are ways to mitigate your solo-ness, where you have Friday and you have the dog, I don't think he has a name, right? Yeah, just the dog, who sort of help you out and can alleviate and give you more actions and things to do. The game works very, very well. I mean, look, all the fun stuff that's in the multiplayer game is still here as far as the exploration and the excitement and the adventure and telling a story, all of these different things. And it just gave me opportunities, especially when I was exploring the expansion, the Voyage of the Beagle, where you're on the trip, the famous trip of Charles Darwin. And, again, there's so much complexity to the game, and sometimes that's good with multiplayer because you've got more people picking up some of the legwork and like figuring out rules for you and things like that. But in this case, it just really worked better for me. It was very daunting to say, hey, everyone, let's go through this campaign of the Voyage of the Beagle. And for me, it was just better to play through it solo. And even just the core game itself just seems to work better for me with that. If you're not familiar with it, it's a fully cooperative game, or in this case, solo, where you are stranded on an island and you have to survive. And there's different scenarios, and you have to explore the island, find new tiles. You have to put out, there's sort of a worker placement mechanism where you make inventions, you make tech that improves your ability to get food. You have to feed yourself, you have to build shelter, all these different things. It's just an amazing game, and I've found that I'm playing it solo more and more. That is Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Island from Portal Games, my number 7. My number 6 is a game that would not have made it on this list when it first came out about a year ago, but because in the meantime a new solo mod has been put out for the game officially, it has firmly made its way onto the list, even though I still enjoy it with multiple players as well. That is Zombie 15 from Yellow Games. Now, I think Zombie 15 is pretty underrated in general, whether you're playing it solo or with multiple players, because it's one of the better zombie games. It looks good. I like the artwork, and I like the miniatures and just the layout of the board. And it's one of the better, or probably the best, I think, real-time timer-based games that I've ever played, where you're on a 15-minute timer and that's the name of the game, and you're trying to get this group of like kids and teenagers out of the city, or whatever the scenario might happen to be. And with the solo mod, I think that this game sort of lends itself to that. Again, it is fun with multiple people, and but it's not for everybody. A real-time game is never always for anybody, if that makes any sense, or not always for everybody. But in this case, it could be even worse because you just are constantly like, all right, go. I'm taking my action, go, okay, you go. Even though you have 15 minutes, it's still very tense. Now, when you're by yourself, it's not that you don't have that same tenseness, but you don't have to worry about yelling at someone and potentially pissing them off. So I found that this one works particularly well. Do it at my own pace, and if I screw up, then I just try to be a little bit better and more efficient next time. So it's worked very well in that regard. That is Zombie 15 with the solo rules, my number 6. My number 5 is a game that has made it onto my top 100 list and has made it onto my cooperative list. It's a game I'm very, very fond of. That is Ghost Stories from Repos. And this is one of the first games I thought of for this list because I own the game. It's one of the games I've owned the longest on this list, and so I've had more opportunities to play it solo, and it just works really well. I mean, this is a brutally difficult game. That's what it's known for, and that doesn't change with solo. In fact, when you have less people to strategize with, it can be very difficult. It really puts an emphasis on you to not screw up. And but I just think it works well because first off, I like the theme is always good no matter what the amount of players is, where you're a bunch of Taoists who are protecting this village from oncoming hordes of evil demon ghost monsters in ancient feudal China. But with a solo game, it's kind of interesting and fun to think of yourself as the last man at the walls, just protecting this little town with every last bit of your strength, and you get power tokens representing the powers of the Taoists who are not in the game to help you out as best that they can, although it's not really enough, and it's still a brutally difficult game. But I love how fast it is. It's, Ghost Stories, even though the rulebook itself, the original rulebook, is pretty terrible, it's still a very easy and simple game to get up and running, and I appreciate that about it. And with playing it solo, I was able to play it more times and explore some of the other, not only difficulty levels, which really, even normal level is incredibly difficult, but also some of the other avatars and what their special abilities are and how nasty and devious they can be. So, really appreciate Ghost Stories at any player count, but as solo mode, I've enjoyed quite a bit. That is Ghost Stories from Repos, my number 5. My number 4 is Zombicide. Now, Zombicide had actually fallen out of favor on a lot of my lists because I had found myself just kind of getting overwhelmed by the amount of content for the game, and a lot of people in my group just had no interest in it. Partially because of the zombie theme, because zombies isn't like the most popular thing in my group, but also because the game itself is not like that. I find it fun, but there's not a lot of strategy to it. It's very obvious what you have to do at times, and it's very easy for someone to just do the alpha gamer thing there, unless people just decide to do random chaos, which has happened, and that's inadvertently fun. But with Zombicide Black Plague, which was the newest set to come out, I have found myself enjoying the game even more because I like the theme better, I like the characters better, and when I was playtesting Zombicide Black Plague for review, I only got one play-in with multiple players. The rest were just solo, and I'm like, wow, this actually works a lot better solo. I think that was the first time I'd actually bothered to play it solo. I don't remember playing it solo with the original Zombicide sets. And I realized that because the game is not too intricate or highly strategic, that with one player having full control over everyone, doing their very simple actions, the game is just a lot smoother. It just plays faster. It's a little bit better. You can try out these different combinations of characters and their special abilities. If the game gets too overwhelming, you stop, you quit, you reset, you try again. But it's still very fun. You still have all the fun stuff with the zombies flooding onto the board and figuring out action efficiency of, we got to run this way. Our exit is cut off this way. We got to go this way. That type of thing. I just really enjoyed it, and I can't wait for more Black Plague content, if there ever will be. There will be. So, that is Zombicide Black Plague, specifically from Cool Mini or Not, although the original would probably work just as well solo. My number 3 is Pathfinder, the adventure card game, and this is one of the games on the list that I will not play with multiple players again at this point, sadly. And that is because Pathfinder adventure card game is really about the campaign. It is about going through the different scenarios, the different adventure paths of the game. There'll be one huge, broad adventure path that, like the Rise of the Rune Lords, or the Skull and Shackles, the path, and the newest one, the Wrath of the Righteous. And there'll be this big adventure path, and you'll buy expansion packs to take you through that adventure path. All these different things. You have all these different characters to customize. You find all these items, so on and so forth. It's really supposed to be like it's not an RPG in a box. People get that confused because there's no role-playing to it. But it is the technical aspects of a role-playing game in a box as a board game. And because of that, and because I can't get my group to sit down and play one game over and over and over and over again, it just wasn't tenable. I didn't want to keep restarting the game or just starting in the middle of an adventure with fresh characters or with pre-built characters to play the game with people with. So it's just been me mulling through it, and I'll admit very slowly I haven't even I've tried all 3 of the sets, but I haven't sat down and finished an entire adventure path. But one day I hope to. But I still enjoy the game quite a bit. This is I love the artwork, first of all, from Wayne Reynolds, and I also love just the idea of it's sort of deck building in a sense. Like you're building your deck up over time from adventure to adventure, and it's devastating if you get killed. It's such a horrible, horrible thing to have to start over again, but that tension is kind of necessary to keep the game exciting and to keep you on your toes and to be as efficient as possible in trying to take out the henchman and the villain and different locations and all these different things. It's just such an innovative game. I don't know if this ever won any awards for innovation, but it probably should have. There's another version of this system coming out soon called the Apocrypha game, which I think I might like even more because the theme of like World of Darkness type theme appeals to me a bit more. But still, I still like the Pathfinder adventure card game. I'll never play the role-playing game that it's based on, even though I kind of did because I played D&D 3.5. The point being, though, this system works very well for me. Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game, which sort of apes what this game was trying to do, is a solid game. It would have been in my 11 to 15, but I still like the complexity of this one enough as a solo game. So that is the Pathfinder Adventure card game from Paizo, my number 3. My number 2 is Marvel Legendary, a deck building game. Now, I wouldn't say that solo is my preferred way to play Legendary, but I will say the less players, the better with Legendary. I think 2 or 3 is perhaps the ideal number here. But as a solo game, I've really come to appreciate it quite a lot when I am playtesting the new expansions that come out. Because it's very, again, this comes down to just practicality. It's very difficult for me to get a group, when I get a new expansion, especially a big box expansion like the Secret Wars, I'm like, all right, guys, we need to try this new expansion. But I can't do everything at once. We would have to do a bunch of new characters, a bunch of new a new mastermind, a bunch of new villain groups over and over and over and over and over again. So I'd usually play it on the new set once with the characters that people really want to try, and then when I want to get more nuance, I want to try different combinations of characters, I would do it solo. And it works very, very well for Legendary because one of the biggest knocks against Legendary is that the setup and takedown is really a bitch, okay? It really is. Trying to put together all the decks and having to take them all apart, the villain deck, the hero deck, and then picking new ones and putting them out and setting them up. It is a pain, okay? But doing it solo, at your own pace, watching a movie on TV, not a huge deal. And then trying the different combinations of heroes and figuring out which ones combo very well together is a lot of fun. So actually, even apart and aside from playing them for review, I find myself just wanting to play it. That's why it's my number 2, because I just enjoy it a lot. It is just a good experience. It scratches my deck building itch, as well as just being a ton of fun and having a lot of replay value, especially with so many expansions at this point. If they stopped making Legendary now, I'd be very, very happy. Kind of disappointed because I want more, but I think I'd be pretty satisfied. So that is Marvel, a Legendary Marvel deck building game. My number 2 solo-able game. My number 1, try to act surprised, is Kingdom Death Monster. And for those of you who watched my cooperative games list, my latest iteration of that, this was zero surprise to you because I mentioned in there, like, people were thinking, oh, Kingdom Death Monster is probably going to be his number 1 on the co-op games list. But it actually ended up as like my 3 or 4 or something like that because I don't like this game that much as a fully cooperative game. It's almost the Mage Knight thing, Mage Knight the board game thing, where there's just too much downtime in between turns, at least when you're sitting through 3 other players' turns, like in a 4-player game. And it's kind of frustrating, I'll admit it. Maybe it's selfish of me. It is selfish of me, but it's frustrating in this game when you have an idea of what you want the settlement to be, but you have to negotiate with the other players as to what innovation you pick and what items you buy and what buildings and settlement buildings you try to build this time. Like, no, we want the silk mill now. I mean, come on, that's really cool. Why are we not doing that? And no, we should definitely buy potions this time, the organ grinder potions and things like that. But when you're playing it solo, the game feels a lot like a video game RPG that you have control over, and you can decide how you want your settlement to progress. And you do lose something in the showdowns. You do lose the cooperative aspect, the team aspect, but again, you get through them a lot quicker, and you have control over the 4 people that you choose to go out there and how they're outfitted. And I really appreciate that, and I think I like it better in that regard. And I think there's a lot of people that agree with me too, if the Kingdom Death forums are any indication. And it's just such a dense, heavy game. And again, going back to the Pathfinder thing, this is a game that is meant to be played as a long campaign, which means if you don't have a group that is willing to do that over and over and over again, almost like a real RPG group, it's just not going to be tenable for you. That's kind of where I'm at with this now. But listen, I'm not complaining. Kingdom Death Monster is amazing. I just got a bunch of expansions. The boxes are still right here. And if you're not familiar with it, I mean, just go watch my hour-long review. But it's just a bit excessive. But what can I tell you? As a solo game, it is just stellar. As any kind of game, it is just stellar. So that's it. That's my number 1. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Like I said, I think that this is going to be a list that is going to be refined as time goes on, and it may be completely different next year. But while I wish there was a bigger pool of games for me to pick from for this list, I am very happy with all the games that I picked, especially my number 1. And if you're not into solitaire gaming, give it a try sometime, because A lot of people complain that they can't get their game group together as much as they want, but they feel maybe a little bit weird about playing a game solo. But like I said, put a good show on TV and try one of your favorite games. You might be surprised. And there's so many games, even competitive games, that have solo variants online, especially from the fan community and Board Game Geek. And some of them work pretty well. So you never know. You might surprise yourself. So thanks for watching. Take care.